When I began playing Vermintide 2, I noticed a distinct obsession with playing Shade. Every match I joined, there was always a purple shadow lurking. People were convinced that this class is just the coolest. I guess it reminds people of playing as a rogue in World of Warcraft or other similar classes. The whole becoming invisible and killing without the victim having time to react seems to be extremely appealing to many, causing sudden sphincter contractions that lead to explosive bowel movements or extreme taboo pleasures. On one hand, you generally come across these perverse simpletons who preferred the role-playing aspects of assuming the control over the Shade class, as opposed to the actual functional aspects. And on the other hand, you'd bump into the occasional player that would be induced into gag reflexes at the sheer mention of this unknowingly beautiful creature. Personally, I always knew in the back of my mind that the class itself had a lot to offer, and that I would eventually realize this once I decided to delve deeper into her mechanics and playstyles. So why did the Shade class gain such a dismal reputation amongst a significant percentage of the Vermintide 2 community? It's most likely due to the fact that the vast majority of players that would take the reins of such a risky endeavor spent most of the match on the floor, waiting for their frustrated brethren to come to their rescue. I've seen it countless times throughout my hundreds of hours invested into this game. Every quick play that presented us with a Shade teammate was another dreaded opportunity to feel your comrade's eyes roll. We all knew what was to come. The pain, the suffering, the hair tearing, the raw absinthe shots. It's not that we have an uncanny talent that allows us to see the future, it's that we see the past, replayed over and over in our battered minds. The next words on Discord were met with much enthusiasm by many. So boys, F5 and vote kick? To which I'd quickly reply with great optimism and plain as day naivete. No wait, let's give them a chance. 45 minutes, 3 aspirin, 2 Valium and 4 tequila shots later, I was right back to punishing myself for being too nice. Of course, most of what I've just talked about is pure hyperbole. Is the Shade class crap? Far from it. In fact, it's an absolute beast when played correctly. Have many of us had terrifyingly bad experiences playing alongside a Shade? Absolutely. The issue is a combination of the fact that the Shade is extremely squishy, having no damage reduction abilities, where the only get out of jail free card is her career skill, assuming it's off cooldown, as well as that most people underestimate the class's potential and lack the time invested to really put into practice what it's capable of. This is one of Vermintide 2's greatest aspects, and also one of its greatest flaws. You tend to hear the phrase easy to learn, difficult to master thrown around quite a bit with some games, especially Vermintide 2, I'm assuming Vermintide 1 as well. The reality is that this game is hard to learn and significantly more difficult to master. There are so many minutiae that can completely change the way you play this game. Anywhere from the way you reload weapons, to how you move your character, to conducting hordes, to how many shots are required by a specific weapon and at which section of the body. The details are virtually endless. What this ends up proving is that no matter how many hours you have invested into a specific class, you will at some point learn something that hadn't even crossed your mind in the past. Something that may seem so insignificant, so mundane, and yet could make you entirely rethink how you play a class. It's truly something beautiful to behold, and a rarity in games. Whether or not Fat Shark designed and implemented these minute yet grand details on purpose is irrelevant. It's not the first time a game is made with accidental positive bugs that actually make the experience far superior. In my experience, after having played alongside every class available, the times I've shined the most as Shade was when playing alongside a Zealot with a two-handed sword. Granted, the person controlling Zealot is a very good player, but I felt I could take more risks and provide more added value to my team. When I played alongside a Mercenary or an Ironbreaker, etc., I felt more vulnerable. This may be because Zealot plays very aggressively, and in turn, that allows you to play more aggressively with a Shade. And when you have two insanely powerful classes such as a Zealot and a Shade playing well side by side, the game suddenly becomes incredibly easy. I've heard a few people argue in the past that melee is more effective and efficient than ranged in Vermintide 2. I have never found this to be true until I played with this combination. Shade and Zealot together is the first time I noticed that you can literally steamroll through a mission with little care for anything that gets in your way. It got to the point where we wouldn't have to stop for anything. If a horde suddenly spawned in front of us, no matter, we just cut through it like a hot knife through butter, without ever stopping. A boss would spawn? No matter. I could literally four-shot it with a Shade and a concentration potion. Specials? No problem at all. The Zealot with a crossbow and the Shade with a longbow can take care of them while holding a Mountain Dew in one hand and a dry martini in the other. I have played extensively with the vast majority of classes and with dozens of class combinations, and the Zealot plus Shade was the first time where I felt as though we were cheating, to be honest. Of course, no doubt experience plays a huge part, but even recently I noticed the game isn't as face-rolled if I play alongside another class that isn't the Zealot. So let's start off with the basics. We'll begin with the passive ability, which is Murderous Prowess. Critical hit backstabs instantly slay man-sized enemies, which is great, obviously. You can even kill a storm vermin just with your normal light attack, as long as it crits. For the career skill, Infiltrate, Carillion becomes undetectable and can pass through enemies, last for 10 seconds or until she attacks. So basically, when you're under the effects of Infiltrate, you do a lot more damage. So you want to save your career skill for Chaos Warriors, for bosses, and in case you get swarmed by a Chaos Patrol or Storm Vermin Patrol even. As for her extra talents, Assassin's Blade, 50% additional damage when attacking enemies with melee weapons from behind. Now this is obviously fantastic since you do so much more damage, but you have to be attacking from behind and you're not always going to be attacking from behind. So let's begin with the tier 1 talents. You're going to be spending 95% of the time at melee, so having that extra 20% dodge is just too good to pass up. 5% attack speed is quite good, especially stacked with an additional 5% on your melee weapon. However, it's just generally not worth it when compared to Shadow Step. Hukon's tenacity isn't really an added value, especially since patch 1.2 dropped, where stamina regen was buffed. Moving on to tier 2. Okay, so for this tier it's extremely situational. If you're attempting true solo legend runs, or if you're running higher difficulty deeds with your teammates, and you're not yet comfortable with picking up Grimoires, then Glade Runner is the way to go. You'll most likely be stacking it with an additional 5% movement speed on your trinkets since curse resistance becomes unnecessary, obviously. Having said that, if you're running normal matches, then that additional 15% increased power you gain from carrying at least one Grimoire is rather tempting, I have to say. More damage is always a good thing. So for tier 3, this is a bit trickier. You have two realistic choices to choose from here. Aerith Kial's Herald provides an additional 25% damage when attacking the enemy from behind, so this basically stacks with your Assassin's Blade for a total of 75% damage. This, along with a 15% damage boost from choosing the tier 2 talent Hekarti's Bounty, you effectively gain an additional 40% damage when attacking enemies from behind. This is significant, don't get me wrong. However, I've tested this quite extensively and I have concluded that going with Blood Fletcher is overall more advantageous. The difference between having the base 50% additional damage when attacking enemies from behind and the additional 25% is maybe 1 hit to Chaos Warriors, worst case scenario 2, but here's the thing, you have teammates. And those teammates will also be attacking the stronger mobs in general. In other words, your teammates will be more than compensating that additional 25% damage. Even if you find yourself alone against a Chaos Warrior, most of your attacks are going to be carried out from the front, not the Chaos Warrior's back. Perhaps if you're going with a Swift Bow, there could be an argument for choosing Aerith Kial's Herald since you have a ton of ammo. The thing is, most of the time you'll most likely be running with either the Hagbane or the Longbow, both of which have very limited ammo, so you want to be able to recover as much ammo as you can, since taking out hordes with a Hagbane, for example, can prove to be more productive and effective than doing a bit more damage with your melee weapon from behind. For tier 4, this is a no-brainer, as usual. Kane's Thirst for the win. You're going to be killing a lot, and that's where you'll be getting your temp health from. Champion of Lauren could really only be useful if you're running the Mythical Vanguard mod. In other words, 99.99999% of players would find this talent completely useless. And for the final 5th tier, your best choice overall is Shade Spirit in my opinion. Your career skill is really the star of the show, so you want to have access to it as quickly as possible. Veil Walker is pointless in my opinion, since there is quite literally zero advantage to spending more time in stealth. Shadow Hunter is similar to the Handmaiden's 5th tier talent, Gift of Ladriel. What that talent does is effectively make you undetectable for 3 seconds, so you can use that time to snipe a couple of specials. However, the Shades version, Shadow Hunter, keeps you invisible even if you fire your ranged weapon for 10 seconds. This talent is pretty much better than the Handmaiden's. So is this talent worth using over the Shade Spirit? I guess it depends. If you're running a combination of Shadow Hunter and Resourceful Combatant on your melee weapon, then that can be pretty amazing. However, skipping parry on your melee weapon for a true solo legend run is very risky. This combination is fantastic for normal runs with teammates, since you get your career skill back up quite quickly thanks to Resourceful Combatant, and being able to take out several mobs when the team finds itself in a sticky situation. Then again, there's another aspect you can't ignore. The Shade is specialized in taking out heavy mobs and bosses. That's where this class truly shines. These are the kind of mobs you won't be killing with your ranged weapon. Knowing this, Shade Spirit might be the overall better option to go with. Shadow Hunter allows you to be the jack of all trades. Don't get me wrong, Shadow Hunter isn't a requirement for killing specials. You can do that regardless. It can be quite situational, which is why I believe Shade Spirit is the overall better option. For the melee weapon, look, there's no two ways around it. As of the upload of this video, dual daggers are really the only option. assuming you want the most potential out of this class. I'm sure there are people out there who prefer to play this class with the glaive, sword and dagger, or any other melee weapon in Carelian's arsenal. This is fine, you'll still pack a punch with any of those weapons, but the reality is that the dual daggers are by far the best and most efficient weapon at this time. As for the properties and trait, I have 2 sets of dual daggers prepared, depending on the game type and group composition. As you can imagine, if I'm the only melee-oriented class present during a match, then I can guarantee I'm not going to have an easy time. In these situations, or true solo legend runs, I generally opt for power versus Skaven, block cost reduction, and parry. I stack block cost reduction on my weapon, along with block cost reduction on my necklace. This pretty much guarantees I can defend and hold my own when I'm alone in the front line. However, if I have another melee-oriented class holding the front line alongside me, then I tend to take bigger risks. Therefore, I choose power versus chaos, crit chance, and resourceful combatant. And I change my necklace to the standard stamina and health. At the end of the day, all of these combinations are valid and effective in most circumstances. It's just a matter of what you prefer in each scenario that is presented. Moving on to the range weapon, my choice for general use is the longbow with conservative sharpshooter. I can pretty much one headshot the vast majority of mobs, including specials, and I know that my range weapon isn't for spamming with this class. I therefore pick and choose which targets to take out with my range weapon. Conservative sharpshooter allows me to be more focused, since I have to be more careful when aiming. It's a good choice if you want to practice your aim. This will later on translate to other classes, of course. For the properties, I've gone with power versus armored and power versus Skaven. I've paired this up with power versus infantry and power versus Skaven on my charm. After testing many variations, I concluded that this combo pairs up nicely with my melee weapon and range weapon properties. As for the Hagbane, it's a great overall option, but I only choose this when running specific deeds that include send in the next wave, or basically the game throws additional hordes at you. In that case, I use power versus chaos, crit chance, and Scrounger for properties and trait. I prefer a more focused build for team play, which is why I tend to choose the longbow for this. It allows me to quickly one headshot most elites and all specials, whereas the Hagbane I need to depend on the dot. For true solo legend runs, Hagbane is the choice. Forget the other range weapons. Swiftbow is not a terrible option, you can spam it more often and it's not bad for hordes, but it's just missing that damage the longbow so graciously provides. And finally, the volley crossbow. It has very good boss burst damage, however not only are you going to run out of ammo very quickly, but you're also a shade. You can burst down bosses much more efficiently with your dual daggers. Like I mentioned earlier, you have a couple of options for your necklace depending on the build. If you have a reliable melee-oriented class by your side, you may want to take more risks and skip block cost reduction. In this case, you might as well go with the standard, which is stamina and health. If you're going with block cost reduction on your melee weapon, then go with the same on your necklace, along with health. As for the trait, Boon of Shalia is the best choice. You want to not only gain more health from the health packs and potions, but more importantly, you want to be able to gain as much temp health as you can in order to be able to afford trading blows with enemies. I've already mentioned the properties for the charm. For the trait, you definitely want to go with Decanter, since this allows you to obliterate bosses when you have a concentration potion. And finally, for the trinket, curse resistance and crit chance if you're running the normal team play build, along with Grenadier for the trait. For higher difficulty deeds where you won't be picking up Grimoires, as well as for true solo legend runs, you'll want to trade in curse resistance for movement speed. If you're considering playing Shade for the first time, I highly recommend you begin playing in a conservative manner. Even if you think you're safe after killing a few mobs, don't be shy to block, because I guarantee there will be a rat lurking behind you, ready to massage your buttocks. Study the enemy's attack patterns very closely. This will help when deciding at which exact moment you want to attack, since you'll be getting hit, like a lot. As for hordes, if you don't have much backup, you should dodge left and right, dotting up as many mobs as possible. Remember that when you dodge, mobs that had a predetermined attack routine on you will pause for a fraction of a second in order to recalculate their attack routine. What this effectively does is help you avoid getting hit excessively. When doing this, however, be careful with any ranged oriented teammates, since they'll most likely shoot you several times. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of your teammates' positions, where the mobs are located. All of these small details will help you excel with the class. Shade shines most of all when you have at least one more teammate that's at melee with you. It allows you to take more risks. You want to aim at having an effective team. But most of all, just have fun.
And he's unfit for service.
I'm sorry to hear that, Victor. Are you still an effective team?
Goddamn door, Victor!
No. We are not an effective team.
Double the discipline!
As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, please like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye bye now. You take care.